Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. If you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Welcome to the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 285. Today we're talking about hard to kill bucks and the one that got away, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. And for those of you that were in the part of the country that was getting scorched this past weekend, I hope you made it through, because that was gnarly. Look, whenever it gets super hot and it's summer and you've kind of had the ability to acclimate and lead into the freakish Africa hot kind of weather that we'll get in that kind of July timeframe, that's one thing. But man, it is a dirty trick to be in May, still during turkey season, and all of a sudden have a 95 degree scorcher with 88% humidity, because that was just miserable. And my dumbass basically left all my yard work to do till this past weekend, so I had to be out in it for the day, getting my honey-do list done, making sure that I am keeping up my end of the bargain. That way, when fall rolls around, I've checked all the I've been a good boy boxes over the course of the summer. But speaking of, man, usually during the summer months, aside from doing the trail camera kind of duties and stuff like that, which Velvet Fest, if you guys aren't aware, is coming up here in the very near future. Some trail camera checks. I try not to check them very often, but what I usually end up doing is take on a project for the summer. So 2 summers ago, it was building the DIY trailer. Last year, I completely redid and remodeled my basement into this lodge, bourbon and cigar bar, kind of bourbon and cigar lounge, I guess is one way to say it. That's what I did with my basement last summer. And so this year, I've kind of been determined to not take on any large projects that was going to eat up every moment of my free time in the evenings and every kind of free moment over the course of the weekends. Reason being is that, it's one thing to kind of prepare for the whitetail season and, be checking trail cameras and stuff like that. And I don't check them too often. Like I said, I kind of set them, and then I maybe go make a check as, kind of a late velvet check, if you will, probably sometime after that August 18th / August 20th kind of range. Then I might do one last quick check in September as they're getting ready to peel velvet and stuff like that. And that's usually it. And then it's, on to hunting season. But this year is a little different because I'm doing an elk hunt this year. And so whenever you head out west, you need to kind of focus a little bit more on your wellness, on your health. Certainly, I shoot pretty often just in general, but I definitely want to make a point to go either to a range or to my buddy's shop or whatever the case is and be able to stretch out my distances and stuff like that, since I'm going to be headed out west. And then need to make some time, whether it's in the mornings before work or after work or whatever the case is, that free time period that usually was eaten up by doing my over the summer projects, to go do some rucking. Because it just seems like there's nothing that gets you ready for a Western hunt or to do that type of stuff, as well as actually putting weight on your back in a pack and taking a hike. So I think I'm going to have to be doing that in some early mornings. So that for that reason, this year I've got no major plans or projects that I need to take care of. I think the only big thing, and it's not even a big thing, that I have on my docket for domestic duties is to power wash the house this summer. So that's about it. But with that, before we kick off today's episode, I have a really awesome deal from our good friends at Exodus. If you have been somebody that's been following the Exodus brand over the last 7 years and have been hung up on trying one of their reliable, dependable, and bulletproof trail cameras, then they have a special campaign that is just for you. Starting right now until June 13th, use the code YEAR7, YEAR number 7, to save 20% off the entire Exodus website. That includes their bulletproof Exodus render and any render bundle, the SP18 solar panel, and the new merch. In case you're not familiar with the product line, the Exodus render is their Verizon 4G LTE camera that provides some of the fastest transmission times in the entire industry. On top of that, it's about as user-friendly as it gets and just flat out works when it matters most. Also, if you're not familiar with the Exodus Advantage, let me just tell you these 3 things. 5-year no BS warranty, 5-year theft and damage coverage, and the best-in-class customer service. Now's the time to experience the Exodus Render. Do yourself a favor and start running the most dependable Exodus Render cell camera. Over the last 7 years, our buddies at Exodus have consistently shown they build quality products and that flat-out work. And they're very excited to announce a new limited product offering for archery hunters. You're going to want to stay tuned for this, folks. This is a kind of a new thing. I got some inside baseball, but I can't share anything yet. But you'll have to sign up for the Exodus newsletter to learn the details. Head to their website at exodusoutdoorgear.com and give the Exodus guys some support, and be sure to lock in those savings. With that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. I have my good buddy, Mr. Bryan Broderick, on from Day 6 Gear. Bryan's just one of those guys that is one of my favorite people just to talk to in general, regardless of whether it's on the podcast or just quick phone call or text or whatever the case is. And you've heard from him before. He's an awesome hunter, and he just kind of has a really kind of honest, genuine, and authentic perspective about life and about hunting in general. And so at the beginning of this, the conversation, we kind of jump into some whitetail hunting. He had a really challenging deer that he hunted this year in Alabama, and then there was a really kind of interesting hunt that took place as well whenever he went out west for mule deer. We then kind of slide into conversation around a lot of the films he's been making. Day 6 Gear, if you've not checked out their YouTube channel, they have been making some of the most killer hunting films that I've watched in the past year and a half. Just the cinematography, the way they shoot, the way Bryan kind of envisions telling the story, and what their purpose is behind the way they kind of produce all their content is super meaningful and super awesome. So I urge you to go to their YouTube channel and check that out. But as always, this conversation with Bryan was just a lot of fun, a killer, and he's just one hell of a hunter and one hell of a dude. So hope you guys dig the conversation as much as I did. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And I got on one of the guys that I always look forward to talking to. We don't get to talk often enough, put it that way, but it's always a blast when I do get a chance to talk to him. I'm speaking with none other than my good buddy, Mr. Bryan Broderick of Day 6 Gear. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going, bud?
I'm good, man. You've had some big life events, dude, in the past day. Empty nesting it now. Got all that freedom.
Oh, there's yeah, it's bigger than the normal event. He's my youngest, but he's also our autistic child who just graduated high school yesterday. So
nice.
we we didn't think he would even make it to high school as far as his education when he first started kind of going to school. He didn't actually speak till he was 6, and we didn't know what the future held for us. And gosh, man, he's just, finished high school in the National Honor Society and graduated yesterday. Man.
And hell yeah.
Yeah, we're just like, holy crap, what happened? So
hell yeah.
We surely got blessed on that deal. So it's good. We're that's the last one. So
nice.
We're free to roam now.
Free to roam, man. That's awesome, dude. Like that's That's awesome hearing those kinds of stories, man. My wife actually works in education, and she works in the area that she helps students kind of transition from uh, like elementary school into middle school, then middle school into high school that are going to need
Right.
like different services and stuff like that. Like whether it's they have need emotional support or whatever the case is, and that work, regardless of whether it's on like the teacher side or the parent side, is never ending. And I just have an immense amount of respect for how much people commit to their kids in that regard. You know, it's like I think of like my kid and I'm like, man, sometimes she's challenging. And then I think like, I don't know what challenging is, you know? And so I'm happy, man, that you guys are, that he made it through and was killing it. That's amazing.
It is.
What,
It is.
that's awesome. My daughter, she just got what was it? She's National Juniors Honor Society. She's 13, so she's in middle
Yep.
school yet, and she just got National Juniors Honor Society. And look, I was never on the honor roll even until I was probably in like 10th or 11th grade. I could have given two flying Fs about school
Right.
until I met my wife, and I started taking all advanced courses because my wife was hot and I wanted to be in the same class with her. And she was on the path of like being the valedictorian of the class. And so I was like, I got to take smart kid classes or else someone else is going to date her. And so,
Oh, this just shows that you were purposely underachieving.
100%, 100%.
And of course, we know what your motivation is now. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
At least,
So that's a weakness.
right. Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
weakness.
At least then, I
Yeah.
mean, she can still pretty much get anything that she wants. You know, back then it was like I needed to get the grades so I could take classes with her so I could woo her. That started, man, in 1993 is when she and I started dating. Our 19-year anniversary is at the end of May. Yeah, our 19-year wedding anniversary is at the end of May, and we were together.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we were together 10 years prior to that. So this will be 29 years of her putting up with my shit.
Well, it sounds like we have the same story. My my mom taught my wife in first grade. My mom was a first grade teacher,
Wow.
and then she went from teaching first grade to principal, and then the whole time she was doing that elementary education, she was continuing her education, and now she does aerospace education.
Nice.
And travels all over the world. She's a workaholic, but my mom taught my wife in first grade. That's how long I've known her. And we dated all through high school. We dated 8 years before we got married. We've been married 27. We'll be married 27 years in August.
Nice.
So, yeah. And I knew every time I would leave to go elk hunting for a month this is pre-cell phone, so I'm a little older. And I knew when I would come home a month later with not a single phone call home or, not checking in or anything like that, she'd already, kicked me to the curb and found somebody else. But she's just,
Yeah.
I guess she knew what made me tick and she was patient. So I thought, boy, I better not screw this up.
That's right, man. It's like you and I think have talked about this offline before, but I think we both feel we probably both outkicked our coverage on the in this situation because she certainly, I mean, all the years in a band on the road, not hearing from me for however long, and then the hunting piece of like just disappearing and not hearing from me. Now we have a daughter, our daughter, and so we have it's even crazy to say because growing up, it was like, didn't really have any rules. It was don't let the police bring you home and don't hurt anybody or yourself. Those were like the standing rules. And now,
Pretty much.
Now I got an app that watches where my daughter goes and stuff like that. And so because I have it on my phone, when I go hunt now, she basically uses that as a leash on me too, where she's like, hey, why don't you go ahead and turn that Life's 360 on since you're going to go traipse about the wilderness with reckless abandon. So I at least know where you're at. So that gives her a little bit of peace of mind, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I really had a hard problem, big problem with that Life 360 thing.
Mm-hmm.
With our phones, because my boys are about to be 22 and 19
Mm-hmm.
in a few months, and so but when my oldest was in high school, he never once gave us a bit of problems.
Mm-hmm.
But my wife was always, oh, well, he's here. I can look on his phone, see what he's doing. I said, that is such an invasion of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is trust your kids till they give you a reason not to.
Yep.
And I just don't like it. And then my dumb ass found out that we all had it on all of our phones.
Yeah.
and she knew where I was all the time. And this went on for years before I realized that, I was like, wait a minute, she knew where I was when she called.
Yeah.
This is bullcrap. I've been getting spied on the whole time too.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a hot minute to figure it out too. Like I didn't realize that because I never even had opened it. It's like she told me it was on my phone. I was like, all right, cool. I never looked at it, whatever. And then I was running errands one day for something. And I think I told her I was going somewhere, but I actually went somewhere else to like buy her a gift because it was like her birthday or, maybe it was Christmas. I forget what it was, but I was buying a gift for her. And I came back home and she was like, I thought you said you were going to wherever. I'm going to Home Depot or whatever. I was like, yeah, I did. She's like, no, you didn't. She's like, I watched you on Life 360. She's like, you went over to whatever, like the mall or whatever it was. And I was like, no, I didn't. She's like, I could see. I'm like, how the hell do you know where I'm at? And she told me, and I was like, no shit, you can follow me on that too. I kind of felt for a minute. I was like, man, this kind of sucks. You can kind of see where I go. And then I figured out I could turn it off. So I do, unless I'm going hunting, then I turn it on if I'm going to hunt. That way she knows, or out of state at least, not at home. But if I'm going somewhere where I'm going to be gone or away, then I turn it on so she can at least kind of know where I'm at, and I don't have to check in nearly as often. So, but good Lord, man, I know when I was a kid growing up, it was, I used to just take off with buddies of mine and go to different states and go to concerts, and I would be gone 2 days and come home. My dad worked night shift, and I'd show up at home. He'd be like, "Hey, where you been?" I'm like, "Oh, I went to Ohio for a concert and slept in the car along the road." He's like, "Concert good?" And I was like, "Yep." He's like, "Did you go to school?" I was like, "Missed 2 days, but I went today." He's like, "All right, cool." Like as long as my grades were good, he was, didn't bat an eye, So
yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, man, I want to get into some deer hunting with you here at first. I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about today because we haven't had a chance to catch up for a while. But first, I want to cover off on at least your Alabama deer season. Because I was Instagram stalking you, and I follow you during the course of the year and stuff like that. And I know you killed, correct me if I'm wrong, but you killed a good buck that went down to the wire, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was like very last hour of, like close to very last hour of very, very last day. And you mentioned in that Instagram post that you've only hunted one Alabama deer harder than this one. And
right.
I was kind of surprised by that because you're a dude that's just like a grinder. Like you get after it. You know what I mean? And for a deer to kind of, and I mean, I hold you in pretty high esteem as far as like your hunting capabilities. Like you're a good hunter. Like you're one of the better hunters I know. And the fact that this deer was a hard deer to kill, what made him so challenging? Because whenever you say something like that, I'm like, dude, I would have had no shot.
Well, so I think the reason is just the southern deer are so nocturnal that you only have like 2 windows a year to kill them consistently. You can always luck up, of course.
Right.
But so you can kill them like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season up until like the 1st of November. And then you can kill them like the last part of January, first part of February during the peak rut. And especially later in the rut when these bucks have, bred a bunch of these does and there's not as many hot ones. So, but just they're so nocturnal, it's very difficult to pattern them. And there's so many deer and so many does that during the rut, they're just going different directions. And we have so much food and the way these deer eat, it's not like in the Midwest where they're going to a crop, back to cover, to a crop, back to cover. Mm-hmm. Ours is a diverse, type of habitat and diverse food. So they're just constantly browsing and picking. And so these deer, they may feed and browse in the, early season one direction all day and then just bed up somewhere. And then they may feed a different direction and through a different habitat or different area the next day in bed. So it may just be this big circuit. So it's not like they're coming to the same thing every day, like more of the Midwest deer. I mean, the Midwest deer are so freaking easy to kill. Early season, if you've got them daylighting, I mean, they're pretty much fried chicken.
Right.
And then during the rut, you get to see a lot of big deer, but they're still kind of hard to kill in the Midwest because it's just so random where they're going to go.
Right. Especially if there's a specific one you're trying to kill, because it's like, who the hell knows? where he can end
Yeah,
up on any given day.
because he's going to end up on a doe,
Yeah.
and there's no way you can pinpoint that doe. So these southern deer they're just 5, 10 times harder to kill than Midwest deer, just because of how they are and how they feed, and then the rut hunting. You throw in the population, it just makes it 10 times harder. So this deer, he didn't show up early season,
Okay.
and so preseason, when I was checking my cameras, man, we had some of the best deer we've had in years, and I had a couple of really good deer pinpointed. And opening weekend of bow season, I killed a really nice buck. Um, the first weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to Oklahoma, I guess around the 5th of November, and stayed out there till about the 20th, I guess, or maybe a little longer. And while I was gone, this deer and another deer showed up, that we had not seen, and but this particular deer that I killed the last week, we had never seen this deer, and it was just a freak,
Mm-hmm.
and anyway, I picked him up all. It was in a certain area of the property, but I picked him up all over the place. I would get a hit here one week, and then a hit, a quarter mile, half a mile away the next week, and then so finally, when it got to the very end of the season, I just said, okay, I've got to triangulate all this. He's 100% living in this 50-acre clear cut now, to where before he was moving around. Now he's 100% focused in this 50-acre clear cut. And I believe, later in the season, it pushes them tighter where they don't move as much from the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew he was there. And I just said, okay, I've got 3 places to hunt him around this thing. And I've got to get really, really lucky and just hunt each of those 3 when the conditions are perfect, and just, try to get lucky. And I thought I had him. I thought I had him once. He came right up behind me on a doe. The wind was perfect. He was 25 yards straight behind me. I probably could have turned around and killed him, but the doe came right under me and just kept going, and right past me in front of me. So I just stayed still and thought he would come through. And he just got that feeling.
Yeah.
And he just turned around and just went right back the way he came. And I never saw him there again.
Hmm.
I mean, he literally vanished from there. But what it did is it eliminated one of the 3 locations,
Right.
which
Yeah.
which I was pissed when it happened, but knowing now that it was probably a blessing that I bumped him there if I wasn't going to kill him. And so the last day, I just said he's got to be he's got to be in this one of the 2 last places, and I'm just going to commit to it the last 4 or 5 days, and I did.
Hmm.
And I had multiple stands set up in a 300-yard circle,
Hmm.
just to get different wind angles and just to make sure I didn't booger him. And finally, that last morning, last morning of the season, he came through on a doe, and went right under me, just blowing and going on her, and I literally was screaming at the top of my lungs. There was deer all around me, and he finally stopped. And when he did, he did not look at me. He was looking at these other deer, but my screaming finally stopped him, and I made a good shot on him, and I
Nice.
just, yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, to push one, I've never pushed one to the last day.
Really? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, not in Alabama, but
Right.
yeah, it
I
was,
I've only ever pushed one. Now it wasn't the last day of the season. It was when I was in Iowa, and I I think I told you this story, but I missed a big one 2 different times and had 4 different encounters with that stupid thing. And then literally on the last day of the hunt, at I think I shot him at like, I want to say 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I had about an hour, maybe roughly an hour of daylight left on the last day of the hunt, of a 16-day hunt. Finally killed him. So that was the closest I've ever pushed it. But what? Yeah. So I heard you mention clear cut. So was this kind of like a timbered area? What was the habitat
yeah,
like?
yeah. So um, there were 2 years ago, there was 2 little 40, 50 acre sections that had big mature pines on them, and they were starting to get to the point to where they were so big and so mature that if you waited, you start running the risk of tornadoes hitting them
Yeah.
or bugs getting in them, and it's just so those two little 40-50 acre sections were cut, and then they were replanted, and so the pines are 2 years old, they're head high,
Hmm.
and that is the single best cover, food, sanctuary, everything for a deer. They love those 2 and 3 year old clear cuts because it still has tons of sun
Yeah.
that can get in and generate all that briar and browse that they love. And then um, just tons of cover. There's just
Yeah.
it's just solid briars, brush, and thicket, and they absolutely love it,
Right.
and that's where they live.
It sounds like too when you were mentioning that they just have so much food. It sounds like there's food just in general in that area, like browse all over us, even aside from the cut. Is that right?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
everywhere. I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, our growing season is so long.
Yeah.
These deer can just browse, and even in the wintertime, it's still so much green in those clear cuts. They just live in there. It's hard to get them out of there.
Right.
But when there's no trees in there, when it's all 6 feet tall,
Hmm.
and it's 6 foot visibility as well. It's almost impossible to bow hunt in there.
Yeah. You're forced to just hunt the edges, essentially.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like I'm having a similar situation in this piece of big wood that I've been kind of monkeying around. Well, I started last year. I scouted it, ran some cameras, learned a little bit about it. I think I hunted it 2 days. Still hunted it a day in late season and learned a lot more because I could, kind of pick up all the sign that the deer had laid down during, pre-rut and rut. And then went back and scouted it this off season. Finally starting to put some puzzle pieces together. But that's the biggest kind of one of the biggest challenges I have there is that there's some good clear cuts in and around that area. And so in the summer, I get awesome velvet like inventory pictures. Like I'll know like what bucks are around, and there's some really good ones. And then they'll shift, right around the middle of September or beginning of September to the middle of September. And then from there, it becomes really, really hard because there's no ag around. So there's not like a destination food source. It's like pulling them in a certain direction. And there are some red oaks in a couple of different areas, but there's really not a lot of white oaks. And what I've learned is that I've learned this from a guy who lives up there is that what they really like or what they'll really kind of munch on is like these beech nut pods. And whenever I scout through, I mean, there's so much beech in that area. It's just littered with beech nut pods, like everywhere. So they've got as much food as they want to eat while they're walking anywhere. And so trying to pinpoint or figure out where they're going to be on a given day is like throwing a dart at a dartboard, essentially. And actually, you might be more accurate with throwing a dart at a dartboard because there's just food everywhere. I think it's almost one of the most challenging things is when deer have food literally everywhere. That's one of the, in my opinion, is like one of the hardest types of places to hunt. I mean, would you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you have the combination of food and cover, it's a dream for a whitetail.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you understand that, it's also a dream for a person that's hunting the same place over and over.
Mm-hmm.
If you have places like that are, food and cover combos, you're going to hold a lot more deer,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have a lot better opportunity to have a big deer on your place every year.
Right.
The places that are great big agricultural food sources with big timber, those are seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna be good just like a certain time, and it's gonna be iffy to whether that's gonna coincide with them daylighting. So uh, even the stuff we hunt in the Midwest, our stuff is more thick native grasses, plum thickets, just big briary bushy cover.
Mm-hmm.
But now I hunt everything from the ground out there, but
Right.
I'm hunting them where they're living and feeding all in the same type of deal.
On the same place. So, so you mentioned that this one was there. There was only one other deer harder than this one to kill,
Yep.
and so I was. So that made me curious. Where I was like, all right, well, if this one was, a bitch to kill, and there was one that was harder, I was like, I have to ask about the one that got away. What was the deal with that one?
Oh gosh. So the one that got away was not only the hardest deer I think I ever hunted, but it was also the longest I ever hunted one.
Hmm.
So This deer showed up one year. He was probably 4 years old, and he was a 140-inch 6 point. And
Goodness, man,
just
140-inch 6 point. That's a mega freak.
this thing's a freak. He's a freak. He's still a freak. I mean, he's just a freak. So I hunted that deer all year, and he was living off the property on a neighboring property that was hunted, is hunted. He was living there, and he was living in, I guess, one little patch of old clear cut, we talked about earlier, maybe 300 yards south of our property. And he would get up every day, and he would come straight north towards us, and he'd either be on an east trail or a west trail, and then he would come into our area, which was a very old pecan orchard that had grown up really thick, brushy, browsy, honeysuckle and briar, just what they love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I set up on this deer, and I had a stand on on the east and the west trail. And I actually had two set up on each one so I could hunt different winds. And the only thing I couldn't hunt him on was a straight north.
Hmm.
And so, because I like hunting parallel winds more than hunting straight up wind, straight downwind. I like being parallel to them with a slight angle.
Right. So two quick questions.
Yeah.
Is this Alabama or?
Oh, this is Alabama.
This
is
okay.
Alabama.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, so this is the honest truth. I hunted that deer for 4 seasons. And when he got killed, he was 8 or 9 years old. He scored 142. And that deer, when I was on the east trail, he came down the west trail. When I was on the west trail, he came down the east trail. And these trails are 150 yards apart. So I saw this deer more than I had ever seen a deer in my life. And I actually shot the deer one time 2 years ago, the same year he died. He literally came through right at daylight, going back to the other property, while the neighbors were parked 150 yards from me in 6 side-by-sides with dogs and shotguns, and they were shooting wood ducks at daylight. And so I'm sitting in the stand thinking, shit, this is just a burned morning.
Right.
And these guys, literally, they might do this 2 times a year. So it never was an issue.
Right. It just happened to be the day that you were going to be there.
Yeah. And so I'm just sitting there going, oh, well, a wood duck hunt lasts 30, 45 minutes. They'll clean up. They'll be gone. It's a good cold morning. I'll just wait it out. I'm not going to get down and go somewhere else. So I just got my book out, was sitting there reading, and they started just banging away. I mean, they were pounding them. And I just happened to look like under the stand, and there's a spike down there, like just browsing around right under my stand. And he's not even looking at these guys 150 yards away, across the line. I mean, he's not even paying attention. And I'm like, dang, this deer's not even bothered, but he's a spike. So I just happened to look up through the pecan orchard, and here comes this big joker on the trail, not only walking straight to me, he was walking straight to these guys shooting shotguns. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 shots. I'm talking about like 40 or 50 shots. I mean, they were, because a wood duck shoots a flurry.
Right.
And I was not prepared. And I got up, and he came right by me at 25 yards. It was still like hazy daylight, real foggy. And I shot and, hit right where I wanted to hit, but I got no penetration at all. Could not figure out what happened. And the deer ran out 75 yards, but he just dropped. And I went, holy crap, I got him. And I looked, his head was down, everything. And so I said, well, hell, I'm just going to sit here until these guys get through duck hunting and then them leave, and then I'll go over there. So I just sat back down. Well, I looked back over, and his head was up, and he's turning around. And when the guys started hollering and yelling at their dogs and turning their ATVs on, he got up and just walked off. And I went over there, and the arrow was just laying in the, he pulled it out with his teeth. And so I went back, and I had literally shot through a 2-inch sapling.
Oh, jeez.
And it went maybe an inch and a half sapling, but it was like a little, I can't remember what kind of little tree. It was like a little ash tree.
Right.
And it went, the blade must have hit perfect. It split it just right down the middle, went right through it. It barely stuck in the deer. And so the fletchings were gone. And I looked, and the fletchings were, back right at the base of that little sapling. So obviously, it must have gone through the sapling, gone into him a little ways. And then when he took off, it must have pulled the shaft out.
Mm-hmm.
And he was fine.
Man.
And so a few weeks later, the last weekend of the season, I have a really good friend of mine, and he had not killed a deer that year. And I said, listen, this deer is going to come down one of these trails. I'm going to see him, but he's going to this big green field. Just sit there. And if he gets by me today, just shoot him, because he's a gun hunter.
Right.
I said, because there's no way this deer is ever going to live another year. I mean, he's not living on us. And it's been 4 years.
Right.
And so sure enough, I sat on the west. He came by the east, and 5 minutes later, the gun went off, and that was it. So the bad thing is I have to look at the SOB every day because he's in our lodge over the fireplace.
Oh,
so I have to look at him every single weekend. But no, he was 142 as a 6-point.
Nice. That's a hammer, dude. I had two similar stories. There was a deer several years ago that was on my father-in-law's property that I was hunting. He was only, deer there aren't super big, but he was, one of the only deer that made it to 4.5. And I noticed him kind of as a 3.5-year-old. He just kind of had a funky rack, big, weird looking 7-point. And I finally had figured out he was similar to you. He was bedding and living on the neighbor, but he would daylight all during the summer on my father-in-law's property. And then as soon as fall would roll around, he would disappear, but he would show back up like mid-ish October, like around the 20th, let's say, right? But it was always at night. And so I knew if I wanted to kill him, it was going to have to be like that first week of October, like right before he decides to kind of like just completely abandon the property. Like he was going to, like I was going to basically have that like first couple days of the season to potentially kill him. And I finally figured out what he was doing, because the season before I had 3 different encounters with him in late season, headed to this one food source. And so I'd finally figured out kind of how he was getting there. And so I set up on him that opening day, got a good cold front, came in that opening Saturday, set up on him, saw him at 25 yards, but he had 2 other bucks with him. And a youngster got up underneath me and winded me and just turned around and walked away. And that was the last time I ever saw him. My good buddy, the old timer who got me into bow hunting, is actually the guy who killed him during rifle season. So similar story, where he called me and sends me a text, and it's like the deer I've been chasing for like 2 years. Which was not great, but I had a similar kind of deflection when I was in Missouri. I hit a small branch, or hit a twig that I didn't see, like in the gray light. And it just, when I looked back at the video, it literally, when my arrow hit him, it hit him almost sideways. Like it slapped him, and
Yep.
he took off running, and I barely got any penetration. Like he broke the arrow off at right behind the broadhead, and
Yep.
just never found him. I'm sure that deer lived, but man, it's just those little things, man. I thought I was going to fill my Missouri tag on that one, and just the smallest of branches that in 100 tries, I could have never hit that little twig again in my life. You know what I mean?
Well, like the same guy that shot the deer that I put on that green field and he shot. He did not want to do it. He's like, there's no way I'm shooting this deer. You've hunted this deer so hard. And I said, listen, it's nothing that I've done. It's nothing that the deer's done. If I could hunt the other property, I would have killed him 4 years ago. He literally comes out in the same spot, and he either goes forks left or forks right. And it's just been, I have guessed wrong for 4 years. I mean, I saw this deer 50 times in 4 years.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sucked.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this season, like I said earlier, we had more bigger deer than we've ever had in Alabama. And so we got, I started hunting this second deer I was hunting when he showed up. Mm-hmm. Well, in this same area, there were 2 other just fantastic deer. And I had both of them within bow range. But I've learned, if you're going to kill great deer, you can't shoot good deer.
Yeah.
And so my old buddy there, I said, listen, here's where these deer are going, and they're going to go come out in the corner of this soybean field. I set him up there and said, listen, just I'll text you. And if I see one of them, but if not, you know what they look like. And he says, well, buddy, if that big one you're hunting comes out, I'm not going to shoot it. And I said, absolutely not. You shoot it if you want to shoot it. I don't care. It's a deer,
Right.
don't, he's like, I'm not doing it. I am not going to shoot that big deer because I wouldn't even be over here if you wouldn't have told me.
Right.
So anyway, one afternoon I'm sitting in there and this incredible 9-point that I really struggled not shooting. It was probably a mid 140s deer, which is big for Alabama.
Yeah.
He came right under me, and then this big deer came out and pushed him off, but he was out of range. And they both went out towards the corner, and a little while later, I heard the gun go off, and I thought, well, that's it. That big one's got to be dead. But obviously, he didn't go out.
Right.
That big one, yeah. And so my buddy killed that one. Well, the very next weekend, I was hunting the same area, and this other big deer that was showing up in there showed up twice. And I hunted Thursday and Friday. He showed up Thursday and Friday. And so when my buddy got there Friday night, I said, listen, tomorrow afternoon, let's go back. I want you to go back to the same spot because that other big 9-point is coming out. And he said, man, I can't do that. I said, why not? So he set up there, and sure enough, that deer came right by me. I texted him and said, here he comes. And sure enough, like 30 minutes later, boom, it killed the 2 biggest deer he's ever killed, So, so this guy loves that I'm a obsessive hunter, over specific deer because I'm finding these other big deer and they're like just saying, hey, here's where they are.
Right.
He's got it made in shape.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we all need a buddy like that.
Yeah. And I said, don't you want to try to kill one with a bow? And he said, look, he calls me little buddy. He says, listen, little buddy, some people are meant to be bow hunters and some people are not.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
And I know my role and I know my lane. I stay in my lane and I am happy to kill a deer with a gun. I'm not to that point in my life. So you do your thing, I'll do mine. It's like 10-4.
Right.
Because I always want to get him a big one with his bow, but he doesn't care.
Yeah, that's funny, man. I mean, at least, it's always not like, look, if someone kills a deer that I've been hunting, like more power to them. They figured him out before I did. Most cases, right? They figured it out, figured him out before I did. In the case of the one that my buddy killed, if someone were gonna kill that deer and it wasn't gonna be me, I would have preferred it to be him because he's just selflessly passed knowledge on to me and spent time with me, teaching me, the ins and outs of bow hunting and listening to me whenever I was a noob, just be obsessive about it, knowing that I'm just jabbering at the gums. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, he put up with all of that. So I was happy that it was funny because he texted me right after and he said, his first thing was like, first thing he texted me was, I'm sorry. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he told me what deer he killed. He's like, I didn't even know it was him. He was like, I just saw a good frame and I knew it was a shooter buck. He was like, so I pulled up the gun and I shot him. He's like, and I didn't realize which deer it was until I walked up on it. I didn't know which deer specifically it was until I walked up on it. He's like, and I just felt bad. And I was like, dude, you don't have to feel bad, man. I was like, you killed a good buck. Like, I'm happy for you. You should be happy. It's like, I didn't have the rights to that deer,
Well, it feels, I mean, it's awesome if you ever get to the point in your life where you can be truly happy in the success of others, you've got it lit.
Yeah.
You have got it lit.
Yeah.
And this guy that's killed these deer, he is the most selfless person you've ever met, the nicest guy. And all my partners in the Alabama deal, they're all that way. They're just good men. They're generous with their time. They're very selfless men. And me, I am an obsessive person when it comes to trying to kill a big deer with a bow. So part of my strategy has to be making sure that these guys kill some big deer and they're happy. And if I can get them tagged out and the hell out of the way,
right,
with 2 or 3 weeks to go, I'm in the chips.
Right.
Because then I don't have to, put anybody out or,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound like an ass. It's a realistic thing. If I put as much work into making sure they're happy and they're killing big deer, once they're gone, I've got it to myself.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes to to consistently kill big deer to be able to minimize pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you're the only cat around, it's a pretty good gig.
Yeah, yeah, and you're 100% right, man. I mean, I always talk with all my other friends about having the right hunting partners and hunting buddies is critical to good hunting. Like whether whether you all share a place or whether you travel together or whatever the case is, if you're with people who aren't in it as much for you as they are for themselves, you're not going to have a good time, and it's not going to be good.
No.
And that's
Well, like, so you know about our place we have in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It's pretty special.
Yep.
And you've seen some of the deer that we've pulled out of there, and I've got some of the same partners on that deal as I do in Alabama, and I've got I think two of the four guys in 6 or 7 years of hunting with me out there. I've hunted there for 20 years, but I brought some guys in with me about 5 or 6 years ago. But two of these guys have never killed a buck on that place.
Really?
Yes. And I know that is hard to believe, but it's just, they are not going to go ground hunt them. They're just going to sit in the stands, and it's just a low percentage deal.
Yeah.
So anyway, this year I said, I am going to be selfless. I'm not going to kill a deer until these guys have killed a deer. I'm going to hunt with them. I'm going to dedicate this year to others. And so, and I did it. I'm not going to do it again, but I did do it. And the first week, I had Jake Downs that you just had on.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yep. Love Jake.
I do too. He's a lot of fun to be around because we give each other crap back and forth. It's really great. Yeah. And then I had Tim Burnett there with us that does solo hunter.
Yep.
And you talk about somebody that's going to give you shit 24/7. He's so much fun to hunt with just because it's so much back and forth. But I did not pick up my bow the entire first week. And Jake can attest to this. I literally never touched my bow, and all I did was go glassing and scouting, trying to turn up bucks for these guys. And I did. I was literally turning up bucks every day. The very first, so Jake hunted 2 days, and he had a really good opportunity. I can't remember what happened. And then I got there the third after he had hunted 2 days. The first morning, I turned up a 170-inch deer.
Oof.
And he was bedded in a kill hole. And it was hard for me not to walk back to my truck and grab my bow
I bet,
and go kill him.
For sure.
But Shane that works for me, the videographer, he was hunting with Jake. And so I called them and said, I have got a good deer over here. And I mean, literally the first day I was there, Jake and Shane walked into 15 yards of this buck.
Man.
Yeah. And the buck just got out of there before he could get a shot on him. Anyway, Jake had a really good trip, had a lot of opportunities. Tim had a lot of opportunities. And then there was one more guy hunting with us too. I forgot about that. So those guys hunted all week. So they were going to hunt that morning and then leave at noon. And then my other two partners were going to come in at noon that Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh no, this is wrong. Nobody was going to hunt that morning. They were supposed to, but Jake had killed one, Tim had shot one, so they were leaving. So they were packing up, and I said, okay, I'm going to go hunt this one morning by myself, and then I'm going to go back to working with these other guys when they come in at noon. And Clint, I swear to you, at 6:30, I had killed this buck that I don't know how old this deer was. But me and the neighbor both, Tyrell, that lives across the river, we had seen this deer for 4 or 5 years. And he was an absolute brute. Just mainframe 8, split brows, like legit Coke can bases. That mass all the way to the end of the beams, just an absolute ogre. And I shot this thing at literally like 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally ran. I never say didn't go 20. I think that's goofy, but he literally went about that far and then just fell over dead right under me. And 10 minutes later, that 170-inch deer that I had spotted that first day for Jake came right down the ridge where I was sitting and turned broadside at 20 yards. I mean, frost coming out of his nose, and he could smell that buck I shot. And he was standing, I don't know, 15, 17 yards to my left, broadside, looking downhill, snort wheezing.
Oh, man.
Because he could smell that buck down there, but he couldn't see him.
Right.
And there were deer running everywhere around us. But he stood there, frozen broadside, just basically looking away from me at that range for, I don't know, 5-6 minutes.
Jeez.
And I'm sitting there looking at him. I've got an arrow nocked. I started to draw twice because you can kill 2 bucks in Oklahoma and you can kill them both the same morning.
Oh, nice. Dude, that would have been a banner morning. Jeez.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, if these guys have hunted all week and struggled the way they did, and if my guys that are coming in before they even get to hunt, and I've knocked 2 giants down before 7 o'clock the morning that they're, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, these guys are going to kill me.
Right.
And so I was like, no, I'm going to make sure that one of these guys kills this deer. And we have all of this on film. Shane and I spent the next week with these other guys, and we stayed on that 170-inch deer the entire week. I mean, we'd pick him up a mile and a half away. I mean, he was all over the place, but we'd find him. But we crawled these guys in on this deer, I don't know how many times, and they kept stepping on their pecker and blowing it to the point to where, I mean, literally, I was slinging cameras, like, I about snatched one guy's bow out of his hand and ground tuned it. I was getting so mad because they wouldn't shoot, and and they never killed the deer.
Are you serious?
Never killed him. Nope, he was still there after season. And but that's how I spent that the second week of Oklahoma this year.
Well, man, if he made it, he's going to be a mega freak this year.
Oh, dude, what's so bad is he was probably only 4 this year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a toad. And we had 2 other really good ones too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's a hammer buck. But this year, man, if he makes a little bit of a jump, you're talking like legit world class animal.
Yeah. So we normally have every 2 years we'll have a buck that's 180 plus.
Right.
We've had 190s come off of it. We've never cracked that magical 2 number.
Right.
But we don't have them every year. But every couple of years, there's always a 180 plus, sometimes a 190. It's just a magical area. Yeah. And but no, I was definitely committed to being selfless and trying to help others.
Right now,
I thought I would feel good about myself going home, and I was miserable the whole way home because that deer got away.
Right. Backfired.
So I'm obviously not a very good person.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you did about all you could do. Like, I would say it's not your fault at that point. So the deer you killed, was that, I'm assuming, was from the ground, right?
No, it actually wasn't.
Okay.
But it was super easy to kill this deer and kind of know where these deer were going to be because I'd been hunting across the river, and I was watching where these deer were dropping down into the riverbank and crossing the river headed north. Mm-hmm. We have stuff on both sides of the river, and so I knew these deer were bailing through there. And these guys that were sitting in these dadgum tree stands all week along the river, they kept telling me, one guy would say, "Oh, I kept seeing these deer north of me," and the other guy kept saying, "Oh, I kept seeing all these deer south of me." And I was like, "Oh, well, I know where they're going. I know what they're doing. They're, dodging y'all." So I just slipped in that morning, before daylight, just climbed up this. It's like a mock orange tree or some kind of thing like that with a bunch of limbs, and just got up there and hung a little lock on. And oh my God, I mean, I shot the first buck at, I don't know, 10 yards. I had bucks all over me. I had both those shooters on me, but I just basically was listening to what they were saying and just put it all together and just said, they've got to be, that's only one place they could be.
Right. Yeah. They got to be in the middle.
But these guys will set up a stand and they'll sit in those stands all week.
Yeah.
They won't move.
Yeah, that was the one thing. I mean, you and I talked about it a little bit before I went, and then I think we even talked about it after I got back. Was just my trip to Kansas and hunting from the ground. I think I was in a tree. I think 2 different days on that trip, just because there was one to get into that was where I wanted to be. Um, because I had a visual on a good buck like the night before and knew that he was probably going to try to come through there with the doe that he was with, and so it didn't work. But it's just the ground hunting is just a whole, like, I don't know. I kind of fell in love with it. Like that's all I want to do now is hunt from the ground. Just because of how, I mean, when you need to make a change or you need to make a decision, like you can just pick up and go. Like, and that's what I liked about it, and just doing as much glassing as you do out in those kind of areas where you really try to work on a visual and then make a move. Like it just, I don't know. I just really liked it. And I wasn't 100% sure how much I would like it before we went out. And then after about 2 or 3 days of the first 2 or 3 days, I was like, okay, yeah, I like this. I can see the deer, visualize the deer and go, I think this is what he's going to do. And then when it works out, it blows your mind. So I didn't fill my tag, but the part that blew me away was glassed one up on like this kind of knob, or up on this, like, I don't even call them like ridges because they're not really ridges in this area, but a piece of high country in this area. And there's a river bottom at the bottom, and glassed this buck in that it was, I think, a winter wheat field that was kind of up on top, and he was working his way. We saw a doe kind of duck into the timber at the bottom, and so we, knew that he was chasing her, and saw like where this draw kind of led into that creek bottom, and was like, man, I bet he's going to come through close to that draw. And so literally just took off running like a bat out of hell through the woods as fast as I could to get to where I thought I could intercept him. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, there's no way in hell this is going to work. I'm never going to see that deer. And wouldn't you know it, like literally 5 minutes later, that buck came by. Like, and it blew my mind because I was like, I've seen guys like, the guys from Whitetail Adrenaline do stuff like that. And I was like, man, I don't think I could get that to work. And sure enough, I got within 20 yards of him, couldn't get a shot, but got within 20 yards. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I just Cherokee'd a deer. I was like, and now it's like, that's all I want to do is hunt that style and hunt that type of terrain.
Well, if you're gonna hunt, there's nothing wrong with hunting out of a tree stand. You have better odds to kill,
Yeah.
execute a good shot, and be more lethal out of a tree stand. But a lot of times, if I do start in a tree stand, and really where I killed that buck and had the opportunity to kill the other one, I've been in that tree before. And the reason is it's up on top of this big ridge. When I say ridge, it may be 20 feet higher,
Right.
but it's on top of this ridge on a fence line, and it's right on the edge of the river. But I can see, 800 acres,
Mm-hmm.
1,000 acres to my north, east, and west, out in the prairie. And so I can watch these bucks. Um, I can watch these bucks do their thing and watch them bed. And it's almost like an observation point, but you have a really good hunting spot too.
Right.
So you're kind of like exponentially upping your odds. You're in a place where you could kill a really good deer, but you're also watching for somewhere to set up an ambush, to go stalk on a bedded buck that's locked down with a doe. And
Mm-hmm.
so you know, I could have dropped down and got in 10 or 12 better trees, easier to get into and easier to shoot out of, but they would have been down in the river and I'd have never been able to see all the grass.
Right.
And I just don't do that. I never put myself in a position to where I feel like I'm blind or just stuck to that one location out there. It's always an observation point with an opportunity to possibly shoot something out of the tree.
Right.
And but I'd much rather crawl on those deer, um, and slip in on them. And man, certain times of year they're so aggressive
Mm-hmm.
that if they think you're another deer, it's actually dangerous
Yeah.
because those bucks will come in and charge towards you. And um, but oh, gosh, man, when you've done it so much and like what an arrow will go through, like grass, it'll zip right through grass.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're, I don't know, if there's a foot of grass in front, just the tips of the grass in front of a deer,
Mm-hmm.
that's nothing.
Right.
And when you have a 170-inch deer broadside staring at you at 20, 25 yards, and you're basically screaming shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to talk with them before you went out there and said, listen, if you hear me say shoot, your job is not to think.
Right.
If you blow this deal and when we're walking back to the truck, you say the words, I thought, I'm going to kneecap you.
Right.
If I'm not going to tell you to shoot if it's not a good shot.
Right. Right.
And they just would not shoot. I'm screaming at them to shoot. They just won't shoot,
Right. So I'm curious because I've hunted the plains in that open country one time and loved it. And I know you've hunted it a ton. And so I'm just curious, what's your favorite time of year to hunt that type of terrain? Because I've talked to some guys are like, they love the rut because anything can happen. And I think a little bit to your point is that they kind of lose themselves because if you are hunting from the ground, like, I blew an opportunity because if I were in a tree, there was one deer I would have certainly killed. There was no trees to get into 15 yards. I didn't have a shot. It was what it was. But you can get away with a little bit more maybe during the rut because they're not thinking 100% correctly. But I've also, talked to some guys that, man, they really love to hunt that early season because if you can sit back and you can glass and you can get a good buck and you can see him go to bed to food once or twice, like one or 2 days in a row, it's like that third day, man, should be a dead deer, if you got to watch him 2 days in a row. So I'm just curious what time of season or what time of year you really like to hunt that open country.
I like to hunt at peak rut.
Yeah.
So if you're going to tree stand hunt, ground blind hunt, ambush hunt, if you're going to hunt them on a travel corridor to and from food and bed, just the simple stuff. Early season is any season other than the rut's better because during the rut, it's literally they are dogging does that don't want to be dogged, and these deer are just running willy nilly, and you can't sit in one spot and have a higher odds of killing them.
Right.
You just it's hard. But during the rut, what happens is these deer are so active and they're moving so much. And if you can position yourself to where you can see so much area, it's easy to pick up a good mature deer because there's so many deer moving.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a hot doe, man, it's a home run at that point because if you can just keep out of her line of sight, you almost can't spook the buck away.
Right.
It's almost impossible because he's focused on her.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's and normally his antlers give them away their position. So
yeah.
I like just crazy wide open rut to hunt them, open ground and spot and stalk because we may look over 50 bucks a day or more. I mean, it could be more. I mean, there's just bucks everywhere, but you're also putting yourself in a position where you might be looking over 1,000 acres at one sitting in every direction. If you've got a spot and scope, it's just, every degree of the dial you move it, you're just seeing more deer moving at different ranges. They may be 200 or 2,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the one thing that was, how open the country is, but how quick deer disappear in that open country kind of blew me away, to be honest. Like, I would see a buck, and then all of a sudden he'd be like next to a milo field, and he would hit the milo and be like he wasn't there, like just vanish, or he was in a CRP field, and I was watching him, and then all of a sudden there was like a small dip that was there. That the dip might only be 2 foot, and he got in it and just disappeared. And I never saw him again. It's
that's
just
what they do, and the key to it is that like the more you hunt a certain area, the more you know the land. You'll learn about those little dips and bowls.
Yeah.
And you'll commit those to memory and know that these deer use that topography so well. They're so smart. And I mean, a lot of times when I see a deer that we want to go after and I watch him drop off into a spot and never come out, well, if you know the country, he's in there.
Yeah.
If you don't know it, you don't know if there's not a blind exit you can't see. You just don't know. So knowing the terrain is super important, and it just takes time and seasons under your belt to know a certain area.
Yeah. So
but it is fun, man.
Yeah,
it is fun.
Yeah, I love it, man. I put in for Kansas again this year, so Fingers crossed that I get it. I mean, I don't have a point this year, so it'll just be on the luck of the draw. Yeah, hopefully I get it. If not, Kansas is going to be one of those places that I go back to every year. I can get a tag essentially. I just liked it that much, and the spot and stock, and really kind of it spoke to me, and I just really enjoyed that approach. But I want to shift gears here, man. I want to talk a little
Okay.
bit about you as a filmmaker, Bryan
Okay.
Broderick, the filmmaker. Like, so, man of many talents. Over the past, I think, roughly a year, Day Six has put out a handful of films that, in my opinion, are some of the most well done and some of the best cinematography I think that you will find on a YouTube hunting channel. It's just it's killer, man. So I guess the first question is like when did you get into the filmmaking bit, and what kind of inspired that? Like what made you decide like, hey, I'm gonna start making films now? What the hell? Why not?
Well, uh, as you know, I'm an old guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was around when the first, hunting films first came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with a guy at this hunting and fishing store that I worked at when I was younger, high school and college, that that he did a, early whitetail VHS tape video, whitetail hunting video.
Mm-hmm.
And it was awful, um, as they all were back then.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated with that stuff. And when he left, he went to work for Mossy Oak, and he is still there. He's been there for, gosh, 30 years, I guess, or
Wow.
longer. So anyway, long story short, I was just always fascinated with that stuff, and always, tried to video our hunts with the big giant over the shoulder VHS video cameras. It was just comical stuff. But I guess in 2012 or 13, uh, you know, one of my buddies down in Florida, Scott Crippen, he owns a company called White's Tackle. He and I were both into photography, and we had pretty nice, you know, uh, cameras, digital cameras,
Mm-hmm.
and um, we're, taking great shots of, like, we did a lot of fishing. We were doing a lot of fly fishing, shots, and taking pictures of the, wildlife photography and all.
Right.
And we were playing around videoing. And so we decided that we were going to, and we were both traditional bow hunters. And so we decided we were going to do a few little films with some of the stuff that we had just accumulated
Mm-hmm.
over the years. And so we had this little thing called Lost Arrow Films. And we did a film for the 2000, I think it was the 2013 or 14 the hunting film tour, not the full draw film tour, but the hunting film tour.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back when it was first getting going. And, it was like Sitka and Yeti and all these big companies back in, I think it was 2013. And we entered this film, and our first film that we did, it was just traditional bow hunting. And then, of course, the guy called back. It's like, hey, you guys were like fan favorite and all this kind of stuff. But we shot a lot of it, but we also hired a guy out of Sarasota to shoot it and edit it.
Hmm.
Because we didn't know what we were doing on the editing side.
Right.
And so, but we both worked very closely with him. And then since then, I've always done just some of my own stuff. And then a couple of years ago, uh, our neighbors in Oklahoma, their daughters married two young men, and I met them years ago. One of them works at the ranch next door, and he's one of the best bow hunters, best whitetail hunters around. He's a young guy, and he's actually our first film we put out is about him. But his brother went straight out of high school, went straight into doing videography work for a hunting show in Oklahoma, and then he started working with a group out of Texas. And I just hit it off with them, and we share notes, and we've always shared, trail cameras, and
Mm-hmm.
we're always kind of hunting the same deer because we're across the river from each other.
Right.
And so I guess 2 years ago, Shane Roy that works for us, he reached out and said, hey, I think I'm going to make a change. Would you, be able to would you have an opportunity, for me to come work with you guys? And I wasn't ready to do it at that point. I always wanted to do, create some good content for our company. But
Mm-hmm.
when he came available and I just knew him and his family so well, I thought, gosh, man, this is, you find room for good people,
Right. Right. Yep.
And so I brought him on, and he and I started doing it. And he had not done as much um, editing as he had film work, but his film work, field work is excellent.
Yeah.
And I made the investment to get really good equipment for us, which makes it easier to create some good shots. And then he and I worked together on the editing. And now I literally, like, when I get the rough cut, my notes will be two or three things, to where when we first did it, it was, a couple of pages. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's just, he's just very talented. That's all there is to it.
Right.
And just does a great job.
Yeah.
And we have a certain feel, and we have a certain way that we want to
Yeah.
show it. We want it to be very tasteful,
Yeah.
and we want it to be almost the type of content that'll counter what the mainstream stuff is being put out.
So before we started the record, we talked about it. We started talking about the films just a little bit, because I've watched all of them essentially. And the thing that I noticed, and I kind of wrote down as I was watching it, knowing that you and I were going to talk, because I was watching your latest one just this past week. Was I appreciated the approach that you take toward filmmaking, with these hunts specifically, like the subtle voiceover, right? The purposeful kind of cinematography, right? It's very, like, everything that you do in these films is super purposeful. It's not the typical YouTube, and there's nothing wrong with the typical YouTube hunt film content, right? Like, people dig it, and it is what it is. But what you guys are doing, like, I was trying to think about it, maybe I was putting too much thought into it, but I was sitting there thinking about it, and I was just like, the way you kind of approach it with the very subtle voiceover and stuff like that is that all the focus is on the process, is on the approach. And to me, that's the part where it's like the words don't get in the way. The words are only there to kind of illuminate certain kind of points.
They just fill in the holes.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, like, kind of really grabbed me, because I think the one time I texted you back, because you sent me a text of one, sent me a text of the video, and I said, I think that's the first video I've ever watched from start to finish that did not have a single word. And I forget what the title of that one is. I think it's called No Words or something like that.
No words, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I watched it from start to finish, and I was like, I don't know that I've ever watched a video from start to finish that did not have a voiceover. But
you didn't miss anything. But you didn't miss anything that was happening.
No,
you understood the story.
Yeah, I understood the story, and I actually just watched it again this past week because I wanted to go back and rewatch it, knowing that you and I were going to chat. Because I was like, I know there's a video that he did that has 0 words in it, and I really liked it, and I went back and watched it, and it's like, it's the tasteful kind of bed music that you're using, and the shots that you're using, and the right moments when it goes to slow motion and stuff like that. Like, all those things kind of make sense and help tell the story. And I just have an appreciation for how you're approaching it. Cause you're right. It is kind of the antithesis of, like, everything that's kind of in the hunting space now. But the funny thing is that I'm glad you kind of made the mention of, like, how you got into it, and it makes more sense to me now that it was, like, way back in the day, almost when video kind of first started in the hunting industry, because I went back this past probably like 2 weeks and watched some stuff from Barry Wenzel, like early Barry, like the first stuff that he did. And
there was was it Stony Wolf Productions or Stony Creek Productions?
I think that's what it was. I think it was Stony Creek Productions.
I believe so. And that was the Wenzels. That was Paul Brunner.
Yeah.
Which I've been friends with Paul Brunner for years. And there was God, what was the other guy's name? Oh man, I can't believe it was this whole group, but what was the other guy's name? He had a funny name.
Yeah.
Their films were so good back then.
Well,
it was like the old Eastman stuff.
Yeah. So, like, the part was that, like, it connected for me whenever you said that, because I was like, that's how those videos were shot then. Because they didn't have this whole, no one quite knew how to tell a hunting story yet. Like there
That's
was,
right.
you know what I mean? So they were just kind of filming the hunt and showing you the process and then giving you voiceover to kind of fill in the gaps. Now the voiceover is terrible back in those days because it's like, Barry was sitting in a tree stand here and this
That's
buck
right.
came out. You know, it's like very,
Just like the old Fred Bear films. Yeah.
right, right. But what I appreciated about those was that, like, minus the weird voiceover narration guy, like the film kind of stood on its own. Like I didn't even need the narration. You know what I mean? Like I could kind
That's
of
right.
follow the hunt with it. And so when I saw that, and then I rewatched some of the stuff that you had done the past year, and now that you mentioned that that was kind of like your introduction, was like that kind of vintage initial hunting video stuff, it all comes full circle for me now. Only you have a better camera eye and are doing things that are more aesthetically pleasing.
Well, I don't know that I do. I know Shane has a good eye, and um, I certainly don't want to take any credit for it. But
Right.
you know, what I will say is that um, I don't know if I'll take credit or blame, but what I'll take responsibility for is the direction
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm trying to do. And what I'm trying to do is balance the scale,
Mm-hmm.
because, quite frankly, I am almost to the point of heartbroken over what's taken place and what the hunting industry and the hunting community has become as far as with regards to how it represents itself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's it's just devastating to me because bow hunting and hunting in general just has always been the biggest focus in my life, and it's been the thing that's kept me on the right path, I feel like. And so it means so much to me that it literally breaks my heart to see how people are showing it to others,
Mm-hmm.
because what they're showing is not what it really is. And the monetization of hunting um, is going to be, it's the death of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm just trying to balance the scale. And like, I never had any intentions of having any of these films with I've never had any intentions of myself being in any of them. I've always sent Shane out with others. And but Shane and I hunt a lot together, and I filmed him and he's filmed me, and so I have popped up in these. But like one of the first things that I did when we were doing like notes and all was he had credits and he had like our names on there. And I said, take that away. I don't care if somebody doesn't know who that is. I don't, this is not about like the ego. It's not about us as individuals. That's not what this is about, which is basically the same, operating and founding principles of day six. It's not about us as individuals. It's
Mm-hmm.
about helping others become more successful and trying to balance the scale the other way to show that every company in the quote outdoor industry doesn't have to sell at the cost of the future of hunting,
Right.
because the future of hunting is not taken into consideration at all with the lion's share of people in the hunting industry, whether it be companies, influencers, media companies, whatever. It's just short-term goals, sell, 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 but at what cost? And to
Right.
me, that cost is our kids being able to hunt.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we're we're gonna do it to ourselves, and we're already doing it to ourselves, and it's
Yeah.
just gonna get worse.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the way you kind of framed that because, I spent a lot of my youth, um, in music, right? And specifically in kind of counterculture, like underground music scenes, right? Which,
Yeah.
and you could say, like, I always tell people, like, when they start talking about the hunting, like hunting influence in, like, in the, within the mainstream, I'm like, you have to realize that we're really a counterculture group. We're a small group. We're not,
Oh yeah.
we're not the mainstream. It's like we are very much a group of counterculture to the mainstream. And the thing that you always see in music is that whenever an underground scene becomes viable enough commercially, it's just pillaged. until
It is.
it becomes a shell of itself and it's almost unrecognizable. I mean, you can look at any major music trend that had a lifeblood of true essence.
Any trend.
Yeah. You could look at punk rock, like great
Yep.
example actually, because it's like, to me, I grew up in punk rock, and punk rock and hunting felt very similar to me because it was very sustaining yourself. To me was kind of what punk
Oh
rock
yeah.
was, And
Yep.
as soon as there were a couple punk rock bands that were commercially viable, they tried to churn out more that sounded just like them. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat until it was no longer viable, and then you ditched it, but then you left it basically laying along the road dead.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny you kind of frame it that way, because I've always kind of had a similar thought where I was like, if folks in the hunting space ever spent significant amounts of time in any other kind of counterculture group that was exploited, they would see it coming.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't think a lot of folks do. But so
Well, it's because the goals are one of two things or a combination of both right now. The goals are ego or money or a combination of the two.
Yep.
And there's really no consideration being made for the platform that they're using to achieve it.
Hmm.
These YouTube people, a lot of the people that do podcasts, lots of the companies, they are literally saying and showing whatever it takes, true or not, true or false, showing whatever it takes, whether it's tasteful or not, to sell product or boost ego.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I'm telling you, you start monetizing this wildlife and the pursuit of it in hunting, it's over, man. It is over. So we're never going to be the people that just going to hold the camera in front of our face and do selfies and talk about, what we think these people are doing, because, I'm never going to cast stones individually against someone else,
Right.
specifically. I'm just not that person. So the only thing we can do is lead by example
Right.
and say, this is how we see hunting. We see the romance of it, the heritage, and the one-on-one that it is.
Yep.
And we see it as an opportunity to help others become either a hunter or a more successful hunter. And that's what we're here to do, is to make it better.
Right.
Not suck the lifeblood out of it for $1 or for ego. So,
Right. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that you like purposefully, it's not about who's in the film or taking credit, because the only one I've ever noticed you in, and I actually want to talk about this hunt, was your South Dakota mule deer hunt. And it took me a minute to see you. Like, because just the way everything was shot, I was like, I think that's Bryan. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not sure. I think it's is that him? Like, it took me almost half the video to figure out which guy was you.
Yeah. Well,
So,
Shane's always saying, take your mask off, take your mask off. And I go, no, you're not the boss of me. I'm not doing it.
Nice. I do want to talk about that hunt, because one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning of that film, well, two things. I'll couple this together. You mentioned that particular place in South Dakota is special. So I want to kind of know and I don't want to know where it's at or whatever. I just want to know what makes it special. And then,
well, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Answer that one first, and I'll follow up.
Well, what's special about it to me is that what's special about it to me is that it's not in a popular area.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in one of these areas where people are, it's not one of the popular mule deer, destination areas in South Dakota. It's in the middle of nowhere. You got to pump daylight in. I mean, it is remote, and I just like it. And there's public land everywhere. There's reservation land everywhere. There's hunters everywhere. And it's just this little sliver there, that this friend of mine and his family have been there forever. And they don't own a lot of it, but they have access and friends and family. And, they've just got this little niche there. And it makes it special because I like being with them. They're just salt of the earth, hardworking people. And, if they tell you something, they damn sure are going to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And those people are getting hard to come by.
Yeah.
So I just enjoy being around them and being out there. And damn, I love it. My cell phone don't work out.
I know, man. Those places are few and far between, and when you find them, they are
Yeah,
special. But yeah, you mentioned, so the way you opened that film really kind of grabbed me. That particular film, because you talked a little bit about, restraint, patience, and willpower at the very beginning
yeah.
as your opening kind of salvo. And you know, is that something specific to that hunt, or is that something that you try to seek uh, on each hunt? Given the opportunity to test those things.
Well, I think that it's different. Every hunt's different. Um, so if I'm going elk hunting, I don't really care where I am, how good the unit is, what the potential is. I'm hunting broadside elk.
Mm-hmm.
I know how hard elk hunting is. I've been doing it for a long time. First trip was 1991. So what are we talking about? 30
30,
plus years?
30 odd years, yeah.
Yeah. So I know how hard this crap is. And so I hunt broadside bulls. And I don't really have an ego that's attached or associated with a score when it comes to elk. I want a freezer full of elk. I want to kill one. So if it's day one or day 15, I'm shooting a broadside bull if it's a legal bull.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll always be that way. I don't think that'll change. When it comes to like the mule deer, I, I like really big mule deer. That's one of the things I like, to really try to kill a big deer, because honestly, mule deer are very, very tender. Not, I'm not saying tender. They're very, gosh, they're hard animals to keep alive.
Mm-hmm.
They're not hardy, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right, yeah.
They're not super hardy animals. They're very susceptible to any types of changes or fluctuations in their world, and they're not going to make it.
Right.
And so for me, being extremely picky and trying to kill a really big, old, mature mule deer, to me, that's what makes it special for me, because I literally just don't want to go shoot any old mule deer,
Right.
because they're hard to come by, and big mule deer are hard to come by.
They
And
have enough
so that,
challenges without someone just willy-nilly flinging arrows at it
yeah,
necessarily. Right.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I just that's just one of the animals that I've really tried to manage and control myself on. And then the other thing too is heck, man, every time we go out there to this place, I mean, we're slinging arrows on the first day.
Well, that was the thing. Like you were mentioning that that trip would give you the opportunity to test those patience, willpower, and restraint, and then you
Yeah,
mentioned that you failed miserably because on
I
the
did.
first day, you like I think it was even in the morning, like you had a great encounter, right? Don't want to
The
spoil
first
the
morning.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then things took a weird turn, but then like it was almost like the magical majesty of the place. It was like all of a sudden, like there was a reason almost why that first encounter ended the way it did, because you would have never had the encounter and the outcome that you had at the end, which I thought was
Well,
really kind of cool.
and like my buddy Lane, that we hunted with, I just adore those folks, and I don't mind sharing. He does have a small outfitting business. It's called Hell Creek Outfitting, but
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have any spots. I mean, he only takes six hunters, and I mean, he's had the same six people forever, and it's not a big place, and so it, I'm not promoting or marketing for him because he doesn't have the ability to take anybody.
Right, right,
So but I mean, I don't want to not give credit where credit is due. It's all him,
right.
but I think he enjoys like listening to me, ramble on the night before while we're cooking steaks and having a drink of brown water, saying, I'm not shooting one tomorrow. I'm not even going to carry my bow. I think he likes hearing that, and then put me on a hill and go, well, you going to let that one go? I was like, shit. It's so hard.
Oh my god, that's
And
hilarious.
the other thing is I'm a bit of a velvet junkie.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like anything with velvet, like just immediately grows. on me. And this thing had a big tag of velvet. This buck had a big tag of velvet hanging off of it. I was like, is that velvet hanging off that thing? And he went, yep. Crap.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
awesome, dude.
So, I mean, it's just, golly, man. Oh, I just love it so much. And I want, I selfishly want people to see it the way I see it.
Yeah. I mean,
I want them to feel about the way I do. I don't want them to feel about it like a NASCAR commercial.
Right now. And I think the beauty of the films that you're putting out. And I don't say this lightly because I'm not a hippy dippy type of person necessarily. And I'm not a big film buff necessarily, but whenever I watch the stuff that you're putting out, like I definitely feel a certain way whenever I'm kind of watching it and afterwards, it certainly makes me think, and I think that's, what good art does, and I would consider what you're doing to be not hunting films, but art. It just happens to be the focus of the content is wildlife and hunting. Because it's shot that well and the narration is that good. Like it's authentic. It's beautifully shot. The colors are awesome. And you just get a good sense of being there, and that's what I like. I like art and, creative expressions that take me from one place to another, like take me to a different dimension. And that is, I think, what your films does. And I think I've only ever seen like one other kind of hunting kind of content, company or production company or whatever it is that has done a similar thing, but not quite to the same extent because there is a lot of narration. And that would be the guys from, Sean Luchtel, I think is his name. I can't remember the
Heartland
Bow Hunters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful cinematography and stuff like that. And I think they do a good job telling a story, but it's still a hunting show. You know what I mean? So
it is. And I mean, it's, they certainly, did it right and did it right earlier, still doing it right. I mean, they're tastefully doing things, you're showing things a certain way, but, at the end of the day, nothing against them, but they're selling products.
Yeah.
And they're not sneaking it. It's not sneaking up on you. I mean, they're not sliding it in. They're not hiding it. I mean, they're 100% selling expandable broadheads.
Yeah. And the only way I make the comparison is just in the cinematography, and that's where it stops. It's just
but they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And, but the thing is that, gosh, man, hunting pulls at your heartstrings so much. And I want people to be able to at least feel a percentage of what we feel when we're doing it.
Yeah.
And, and be able to walk away with that feeling.
Yeah.
You don't get that when you're watching a YouTube channel when somebody's just, I mean, nothing against it. It's just a different type of content, but it's just they push record, it runs for however long, and then they basically download that to the screen and you watch everything.
Yeah.
When there's no effort put into it other than pushing the record button and selling something. So,
yeah.
And I know it's counterintuitive for me to keep saying this because we do sell hunting products, but nowhere in our content are we pushing our products on anybody.
No, I mean, there's you'd be hard pressed to know what it is that Day 6 creates from the videos.
Yeah. So it's got to be genuine. They've got to come to us, in a very organic way. But that's how good relationships are built. They're built on good foundations. They're not built on fraud, smoke, and mirrors. So anyway, that's it.
Awesome, man. Well, I know I could sit and talk to you all day, dude. I love talking to you, man. We need to do this more often. But I'm going to let you go. I want to be sensitive to your time. Yep. I got to run to a jiu-jitsu practice and get my ass kicked some more tonight. But before I do that, let people know where they can find out more about Day 6. Let people know where they can watch some of these kick-ass films you guys are doing.
Yeah. So day6gear.com, and then we're on Instagram, Day6Gear, and then we have a Day6 Gear YouTube channel. Pretty easy to find. It's all spelled out, Day6 Gear.
There you go. All right, brother, man. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
You bet.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Spartan Forge, Exodus, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.